The cold wind cut through the cemetery like it had something personal to say, and Michael Harper felt it in his bones as he stood near the edge of the service, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, wondering why grief always found new ways to feel heavier. The casket had already been lowered, the pastor's voice fading into the gray sky, when he noticed the young woman sway just a little too hard on her feet. One hand pressed protectively over her swollen belly, the other clutching a folded program she hadn't once looked at. For a split second, Michael hesitated, the way people do when they sense a moment is about to ask something of them. And maybe you can imagine it too, standing there with your own burdens, asking yourself whether you would step forward or pretend you didn't see. Michael had learned about pretending years ago, after his wife died in a highway accident that left him alone with a 5-year-old son and a mortgage he could barely touch. Since then, life had been a series of quiet sacrifices made without applause. He worked maintenance at a public high school in Ohio, rose before dawn, packed lunches, and tucked Noah into bed every night with the same worn Bible story, because it was the only one that still made sense to either of them. Money was always tight, grief never fully gone, and yet something in him had refused to harden. So when the woman's knees buckled and her breath hitched in panic, his body moved before his fear could talk him out of it. He reached her just in time, steadying her weight as she leaned into him, her face pale and damp with tears she didn't seem aware were falling. The people behind them murmured and shifted, but no one else stepped in. Michael guided her toward a nearby bench beneath a bare oak tree, careful and slow, as if every movement mattered. He felt the tremble in her arms, the heat of her grief, and the unmistakable curve of new life between them, a reminder that loss and hope often walk together in uncomfortable silence. He didn't ask her questions, didn't tell her everything would be fine, because he knew better than that. He just stayed, holding space the way he wished someone had once held it for him. Her name, he would later learn, was Hannah Whitaker, and she was alone in ways that had nothing to do with the empty seats around her. The man being buried was her uncle, the last family member who had spoken to her without judgment after the father of her unborn child disappeared. She had come to the funeral despite doctors' orders to rest, despite the whispers she knew followed her wherever she went. Sitting there beside Michael, her breathing slowly evening out, she let herself cry the kind of deep shaking sobs that come when the world feels unsafe and you're too tired to pretend otherwise. Michael kept his arm around her shoulders, staring out at the rows of headstones, thinking about how strange it was that strangers could feel like lifelines in moments like this. After the service ended and people drifted away, Michael walked Hannah to her car, making sure she was steady before letting go. They exchanged a few awkward words about the weather and the long drive home. Nothing profound, nothing that would later be quoted or remembered as life-changing. And yet, as Michael watched her pull away, one hand lifted in a small, grateful wave, he felt a quiet ache in his chest, the kind that comes when you sense a moment has mattered even if you don't know why. He returned to his own car, drove home to his small rented house, and spent the evening helping Noah with homework, never imagining that the day wasn't finished with him yet. It was hours later, just as the house settled into its familiar nighttime creaks, that Michael's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it, assuming it was another scam or wrong call, but something urged him to answer. The voice on the other end belonged to a lawyer from Cleveland, formal and careful, asking if he was sitting down. Michael laughed at that, a tired sound, and leaned against the kitchen counter. By the time the call ended, the room felt unreal, like the air had thinned. The man whose funeral he had attended was a reclusive real estate magnate who had quietly amassed a fortune worth nearly $500 million. And in a will revised just weeks before his death, he had named Michael Harper as his primary heir. The reason, the lawyer explained, was simple and astonishing all at once. Years earlier, Michael had returned a lost wallet he found in a grocery store parking lot, refusing the cash inside and telling the elderly man who owned it that kindness didn't need a reason. That man had never forgotten. He had watched Michael from a distance, seen the way he lived, the way he raised his son, the way he showed up for strangers without knowing who they were. And on the day of his funeral, unseen by Michael, he had watched him again, helping a pregnant woman when no one else moved. In that moment, the old man had felt certain his fortune would land in hands that wouldn't waste it. Michael sank into a chair, his head in his hands, overwhelmed by a mix of disbelief, fear, and something like grief all over again. He thought of the years spent worrying about bills, the nights he lay awake wondering how he would ever give Noah more than survival. He thought of Hannah, driving home alone, carrying her own impossible future. The money felt heavy already, not like a reward but a responsibility. He didn't sleep much that night, staring at the ceiling, asking God questions he wasn't sure had answers. In the weeks that followed, Michael's life changed in ways both obvious and subtle. He secured his son's future, paid off debts, and set up scholarships for kids at the school where he worked, refusing to quit his job until he knew what kind of man he wanted to be with this second chance. He reached out to Hannah, offering support without conditions, making sure she had medical care and a safe place to land. Watching her hold her newborn months later, a quiet strength in her eyes, Michael felt something heal in him that he hadn't realized was still broken. The money didn't erase the past, but it softened its sharpest edges, turning survival into possibility. And maybe that's the part that stays with you, long after the shock fades. The idea that a single, ordinary act of kindness offered without expectation can ripple outward in ways we'll never fully see. If you were standing there in the cold, carrying your own grief, would you still reach out to someone else? Would you trust that doing the right thing matters, even when no one seems to notice? Michael never became a headline or a legend in his own mind. He remained a single dad who understood loss, now armed with the chance to ease it for others. Before the story closes, take a moment and share in the comments what this moment stirred in you, or a time when kindness changed your life in an unexpected way. And if this story truly touched your heart, please gently like, comment, share, and subscribe, so more stories of quiet goodness and second chances can find the people who need them most.